Welcome to the Costume Plot.
I'm JoJo Siu.
And I'm Sarah Tim. We're professional designers with a passion for costume design and the performing arts. Our podcast does contain spoilers.
We hope you'll join us every other week as we delve into the wonderful world of costume design in the Costume Plot. All right.
Welcome back.
Welcome to the Costume Plot.
It's us again.
Yay! What are we on now? Month 4? 5?
Oh, good question. Yeah?
I've lost track, but that's great. It means we're that far in.
And we're still enjoying
That's
it,
a good sign.
which is good.
Yes. Some little bits of homework, but at least we're enjoying the process.
Hey, it's... Every time I'm like, oh, no, I have to sit down and watch that movie, I end up really enjoying myself, and I do my research, and I like the research part, so I'm still having fun, even if sometimes I forget to make time to do it.
It's true. All right. So today our theme is going to be black and white movies. We haven't really covered this yet, so this is kind of a new platform to talk about costumes. And one of the things that we are going to talk a lot about, or I assume we're going to talk a lot about, Sarah, is that, how do we do costumes and how do we differentiate characters when you're limited to a color palette of only monochrome?
Yep.
Because, now we're not looking at thousands of saturate colors and ways to parallel, characters and things like that. So there's a very fine art of knowing how to balance textures and patterns and things like that in a black and white film. So really excited about that. I'm going to be going first today, so I'm super excited. I'm going to be covering His Girl Friday, which features Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell. I'll tell you a couple fun facts about that in a second, but it was released in 1940, so there's a lot of 1940 silhouettes that you'll see in our costumes for this one. It was directed by Howard Hawks, who actually was a humongous conglomerate in the film industry. He did Scarface, Bringing Up Baby, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Only Angels Have Wings. So he's actually worked with Cary Grant quite a few times. I think Rosalind Russell was probably not one of his regulars, but she got really famous through this movie. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The costume designer was Robert Kalloch. I don't know if that's how you say his name. Kalloch. Someone can correct me out there. He was actually...
Kalloch.
Kalloch?
Kalloch. Sorry.
I'm not good at that kind of pronunciation. But he ended up becoming the chief designer for Columbia Pictures and actually was really, really like the heyday designer of the 1932 to 1940 period, specifically for screwball comedies, which this is considered one. And he also did quite a few projects with Howard Hawks. So It Happened One Night. He did The Awful Truth, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and he also did Only Angels Have Wings with Howard. So again, a lot of these are much older movies. So if you haven't seen anything prior to 2000, then maybe these are some new titles for you. But just know that these two were really kind of big in their heyday of being in the film industry. And Robert actually went on to be one of the mentors for Adrian, who is very well known for all of his costume designs, pretty much from like the 50s on, essentially. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the actors themselves, because again, the age of Hollywood, especially in the 40s, it very much became about who you knew, the celebrities that you recognized, at least from the kind of common people. Celebrities are still very important for us today, but there's a lot more celebrities all over. So like we see musicians as celebrities, we see, advertisers and promoters as celebrities as well. Whereas this time it was mostly like Hollywood actors and stars that became really in the public eye. So this was actually a piece that focuses a lot on the groundbreaking look at women in a man's world. And one of the things that made Rosalind so popular for this movie Interestingly enough, she joked that she was like the 15th choice in this movie because Howard went through basically every other person. Irene Dunn, he went through I think he went through Berlin Irving, or I don't know.
Irving Berlin?
I'm making up names now. Huh?
Irving Berlin?
No, I'm thinking of the wrong name.
Oh.
Because that's not a female.
That's not a lady, no.
But he basically went through the entire list of all the other Hollywood female stars at this time, and basically I think only one of them was actually unavailable, but I'm pretty sure everyone else on his list basically said no to the project. So interestingly enough, when he ended up with Rosalind Russell, he multiple times told her, and she knew that she was not the first choice. So she found out in the public, because I think it ended up in the news, that he had gone through all these other people before asking her. So what a weird way to walk into a project knowing that you're not first choice, but she totally ran with this. She ended up actually, because the dialogue is so snappy in this particular film, because it's about reporters, she actually ended up hiring, I can't remember who it said she hired. She hired someone to basically help kind of clean up the dialogue and help them make it faster and make it really paced really well. So because of that, Cary Grant actually ended up becoming really good friends with her while they were filming together, and ended up asking for his own personal training with this same coach, basically.
Cool. It's almost like a script supervisor, but your own personal one.
Yeah, exactly. So again, she really brought a lot to this project, and didn't get discouraged by the fact that she wasn't first choice. She just totally jumped right in, and just really gave it 110%, which I really love. And that's very much like her character in the movie as well. So again, she is, the most powerful female in this giant room of mostly male actors. And she really carries her own very well. And even in the, there's small scenes where you could argue that there's some sexism going on and all of that, but she really holds her own gravitas very well throughout this movie. And I think that they did a really good job of not just making her this kind of meek female that's surrounded by all these other male reporters. She certainly knows how to stand on her own. She's very independent. And they actually do contrast her with another character who is a little bit more kind of seen as weak and naive and more feminine, kind of drawn to her own emotions and overwhelmed by her own emotions. So seeing that in comparison to how she portrays Hildy, who's our main character, you really see a lot of that contrast, and they did that really well. And again, this is in the 1940s when most women weren't really in what they call a professional environment. The professions that were kind of given to women at this time were either secretaries, teachers in education, or in the nursing departments. And there's nothing bad about any of these departments, but it was a very limited place for the woman in the work field. And so having her in this role as a reporter really made her stand out against everyone else. So the fact that she made such a huge impression on women everywhere after this movie, I think it just goes to show how much power she had, even though she wasn't first choice, and how much she made a positive out of this kind of negative start, for lack of a better term.
Well, I mean, on Drag Race last week, Anne Hathaway was on, and she said she was the 8th choice for The Devil Wears Prada. So, I think you just kind of have to look at it as well, it was meant to be. None of those other people were right for it, but I am. So I need to take advantage of the fact that I'm here and they're not.
Right. Instead of looking at all the negative that comes with that. Yeah. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen.
Ooh.
All right. So I am going to pretty much go in order with this movie. There aren't going to be as many costume looks for this particular episode, but a lot of it was because most of this happens within a span of less than 24 hours, right? So
both of our movies do, which is so funny that we both picked some that are like that.
Yeah. It's crazy though, because in this time, you're not really looking at years and years of time. A lot of times you are focusing in on a moment in time or a span of 24 hours or even a couple hours. So it's kind of crazy when you're watching the movie because you're not thinking about how little time has passed because it just seems like so much is happening.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait, it's only been 24 hours. So yes, I do love that. So just to give you a little bit of background on the story, and again, there are spoilers, but Rosalind and Cary Grant play Hildy, who's the wife or ex-wife, and Cary Grant plays Walter. And Walter basically runs his own newspaper company. He's a really he's always been a reporter that's always after the story. And the opening credits actually starts with this whole quote about how, when you're a reporter, it's all about the story. Nothing else matters, to the point where, it goes to extremes like murder and all these other things in order to get the story. And it's very much kind of the presence of what this story is about. So Walter owns this company. Hildy used to work for the company, but they've since gotten divorced. It's been probably a couple months now since they've gotten divorced. And she's the one who actually asked for the divorce. And her argument in the beginning, or her justification, was that Cary basically, or I should say Walter. I keep saying Cary because that's the actor.
Because it's Cary Grant, yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows who Cary Grant is. Yeah. But she ends up asking him for a divorce because she believes that he's basically too tied to his work. So he hasn't paid enough attention to her as a woman. He hasn't taken the time to appreciate her and really show her what a husband doting on his wife should look like. And again, you don't really see that change for Cary Grant the entire movie. Because, even at the end, I don't think that he necessarily suddenly turns into this doting husband. But you know that because he's not the one who asked for the divorce, he still is very much in love with her. And so the movie is very much about his kind of sneaking around and trying to manipulate the situation so that he can try and win her back. And, of course, all of that comes at the cost of a story that they end up breaking onto. Mm-hmm. So the first scene when she comes into the office is actually when she's trying to tell Walter that she is about to get engaged to another man. So she's been dating someone else since they've gotten divorced. She's fallen in love with this man, and you meet him, but you don't really know that he's the engagee until she goes into the office and talks about this engagement ring. And she's covered her hands with gloves, so you don't even see that she's actually coming in for this purpose. So the movie really just starts you right in the middle of it. But the first scene that you see her in is this beautiful chevron two-piece suit with matching hat. I love that the designer has really created such a huge contrast, not just with her and the stripes on her and the black versus the kind of lighter color. Interestingly enough, they said that the actual garment is supposed to be black and pink, which it's so funny that this is how it's reading to us because we only see black and white or gray. But to know that this is a pink suit gives us a whole different, understanding of this garment. But the opening scene, she walks through the first kind of row of all these other reporters, and she's the only thing that stands out. And part of the reason they're able to do that so successfully is because Robert Callaghan, I'm going to say that name wrong every time. Robert Callaghan ends up keeping everyone else around her in these pretty solid colors, or they're really subtle patterns if there are any. And because she's the only thing that's got any kind of a vertical or even pattern on her body, she's the only thing that you see in the room against everyone else that's in these kind of solid versions or hues and tones of gray. Let's see. I think I do love also that he's put a lot of the women in these scenes in very powerful colors because I think there's maybe one or two other women that she passes in the office. And you can tell one of the other women who may also be a reporter. You never really see her again after this first scene, but she's also in this really dark black.
Oh.
So that's not her. That's actually the assistant. But you can tell even the assistant is in this more subdued gray behind her really vibrant stripe. Nope, I guess I didn't grab it. Well, anyways, she's in essentially a what looks like a black two-piece skirt suit. So again, she's one of the ones that kind of stands out against everybody else. But it's really, in that scene, it's just Hildy and this other woman in this black two-piece suit. So really making our women very strong in this world of kind of, for lack of a better term, hazy looking colors for all the other men, so that they really stand out a lot more. So this was something that I wrote just for my own interpretation of this suit. Obviously, I think it's a beautiful stripe. During this time, they also mentioned that because they had to ration everything since it was entering into World War II, Robert ended up, kind of changing the direction of the stripes in order to save every piece or scrap of fabric as he could. So you see that not just in the lapels on this, but you also see that in her second suit that she changes into later to travel. But one of the things I really loved is that for me, I feel like the stripes and the vertical lines in both of her outfits, so not just in this one, but in the second look that we'll look at, it shows a very tight-laced woman. She obviously has to be extremely strong and hold her own in a world full of men who are constantly trying to talk over her. And that's a big part of this movie too, is that every character is constantly talking on top of everyone else. But you really focus in on her verbal language and communication with her ex-husband. And you focus on that not just because of their dialogue, but also because I think we see and focus on her in the image because of her stripe too.
Yeah.
So even though she does a lot of kind of sarcastic joking with Walter, and I feel like she kind of keeps up with his sarcasm really well. But I think, and that femininity comes from the fact that she wants to be loved as a wife and she wants to be treated as a woman. But I think with the stripes, it definitely gives her that more masculine kind of authority or power that she has in the room. And it certainly makes us, the viewers, focus in on her power a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Moving on. So Walter's fursuit. So in contrast to her dark and kind of bold lines, you see Walter in this really kind of pale and subdued, it almost looks like linen. Or I'm not sure exactly what the material is, but he in this particular scene, he's also the only person in this kind of double-breasted suit. Mm-hmm. So that also is another way to sort of stand them out, especially with the limited color, by changing up the silhouette of the jacket and looking at the way the lapels cross. You do see other reporters in double-breasted jackets later, but he's the only one that kind of remains in this kind of lighter hue. So I love that they've definitely kept that to his look the entire time. Again, this is all within 24 hours. So this is literally the outfit he stays in the entire day. So it's great, nice and easy, one and done. I do also love that if you look closer, which you can't see it as much here, he actually does have a pretty subtle, almost window pane plaid. Mm-hmm. And again, you don't notice that until you're looking up close and personal, and it's after you're staring at the jacket for, a couple minutes before you notice it. So you don't see it when she first comes in, but that initial contrast of the really light suit versus her really dark stripe is just a really nice way of looking at their characters too. Because I think the lightheartedness of his character is very much reflected in how vibrant, or I say vibrant, but how light his suit jacket is. Because even when we see him later with Bruce, who's the engagee, there's this really nice kind of play of different tones of gray. So you see the dark is with Hildy, and the almost black is with Hildy, and then you see the kind of medium tone with Bruce, and then Cary Grant is in the lightest tone of gray. Mm-hmm. When we first meet Bruce, again, just looking at the kind of difference in silhouette, you can immediately tell that Cary Grant is our very sharp, sleek businessman. And he's always in these kind of very straight vertical lines. His suit is very cut, and it's tailored very nicely, and it's much more vertical and slim fitting. Whereas with Bruce, the first time we see him, he's in a trench coat. It's almost a little baggy on him. We don't really see the shape underneath. And it also gives him a much more kind of casual and a little bit of a naive vibe. And I think he definitely has that throughout the movie. We certainly see him as it almost looks like his mother has kind of dressed him. He's got a nice suit, but it's not quite the same fit. He doesn't take care of himself in the same way that Cary Grant does.
Right.
And even the way that Hildy does. And I think both of them are very metropolitan in comparison. Mm-hmm. So yet another comparison of the two of them. This is not the best example of the light versus dark because you don't really see his gray suit yet. But again, just that idea of the trench coat being kind of oversized on him versus Cary Grant's more tailored jacket.
Ooh, okay. Wow.
So then, halfway through the day, basically, Hildy ends up telling Walter that she's heading down to Albany with Bruce later that day, like within a few hours' time. And they're basically going down to Albany to get engaged, to get married. And they're bringing his mother with him. So she's trying to plan this train ride to go down to Albany and get married and get hitched. And of course, Walter, everything is kind of working in his brain to try and prevent this from happening. He's trying to get the train schedule changed. Like, he literally is calling people to be like, can we stop the train from happening? Which is kind of crazy that he's got that kind of power.
Yeah.
But literally doing everything in his power to try and stop her from getting married to this other guy. So, of course, the biggest part of this is that there's this big scoop that's happening that all the reporters are trying to get on top of. So the side story in all of this is that there's this man, Earl Williams, who has been, I can't remember the exact situation because it was very late at night last night, but he basically ends up shooting someone that was unintentional. And, of course, his argument is that he didn't do it on purpose. I believe it was a police officer that he ended up shooting, but he didn't do it on purpose. He thinks he's in jail innocently and all of this other stuff. So all of the reporters are trying to find out what actually happened, why he's claiming himself innocent. He happened to also be talking to a woman. I think they had like one conversation, but then the news reporters, and you'll see this a couple times in this movie, the news reporters are all about writing a story. So whether it's true or not, you'll see a lot of them actually make up facts, or they'll over-exaggerate what's actually happening. So there's a lot of, false news out there, which ironically today, that's very, very applicable and very kind of what's happening. So again, this idea that all of them are trying to get the real news out there versus the fake news. And so this huge story kind of falls into their lap. And so, Cary Grant's character knows this, and so he kind of brings it up on a whim, hoping that it'll basically get Hildy convinced to kind of come back and work for him instead of going and getting married. And he knows her well enough to know that that's probably what she'll end up doing. So she keeps getting stalled and stopped, and everything keeps going wrong. Like, she, every time she tries to meet up with Bruce, or every time she tries to get him on the train, something else happens. So there's all these, it's like a series of different things that Cary has basically manipulated to get Bruce in trouble and prevent them from going down to Albany. So this is her in the kind of news reporter room, and you see her with all the other news reporters here. And even though their colors are very similar, just the fact, again, that she's got the most prominent stripe going on with her her two-piece skirt suit. And again, this is another place where they talked about Robert really recycling the direction of the fabric so that he could still reuse essentially every leftover scrap of what they had to make this suit. And it's just so tailored very well to her body. It fits her beautifully. And again, it just gives her a lot of power in this scene, especially with all the other reporters in the room. I think the only one that really has any kind of texture is kind of this more dumpy looking character, for lack of a better term. And he's kind of like they're all a little bit goofy, and I think they're all a little bit kind of cutthroat, but not necessarily in a bad way. They're just all trying to scoop the story.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you'll see all of them appear in and out of the room trying to get the newest scoop. And so they'll all just update stories. And a lot of them are made up. You'll hear them saying things that are totally in contrast with what's actually happened. And they'll just say some random statement to put in the front line of their newspaper. So yeah, it's an interesting look at just how false news can travel so easily and how it can easily be misinterpreted or just mistold. And of course, Hildy is the one that's trying to honor the original story. So she actually befriends Earl Williams. She goes and talks to him. And again, very much kind of pointing to the fact that as an independent woman in a man's world, she is really the go-getter. She takes a lot of initiative. She knows how to get the right scoop. She knows how to go to the right people to get the story that she needs. Mm-hmm. Okay, so one of the things, we do see her in that pinstripe suit for a good chunk of this scene when she's with the other reporters. But when she first appears, we actually see her in this beautiful fur coat. And again, this is just, again, continuing to show all the different ways in which we have to find other venues or means of being able to differentiate characters. And Robert has certainly done that really well with even just making her the center of focus, because she's totally got a very different texture than everyone else around her.
Yeah.
And it's also a much lighter color. So she's the first thing we see in the room. And I think they mentioned this with the movie as well, but she's always kind of the center of attention here. So it's never like, you never lose her on screen. Let's just say that.
Right.
Okay, so this is another example of the contrast between Carrie and Bruce. And you can see here Bruce's darker suit, which if you look really carefully, he does actually have a really subtle pinstripe in there. But when you first look at him and you see the three of them eating lunch together, you can see the very clear contrast of color. So Carrie is actually, he normally would have his blazer on, but in this particular scene, this is when they're talking about Hildy. And it's interesting because Bruce is talking very romantically about Hildy in this scene, but Cary Grant is trying to basically throw him off the scent by saying like, oh yeah, Hildy, she does all these horrible things. Like, you don't want her to, she's going to just fight you back, and like basically trying to put a bad light on her so that Bruce will only see the negative. And of course, it's his sneaky way of trying to get Bruce away from her and get her back for himself.
Of course.
But we see this scene where he's got his jacket off, and how do we make someone in this period look sexy? And in this case, it's almost like different levels of undress versus dressed. Mm-hmm. And so whereas, the conservative look of Bruce in this like fully outsuited, blazer and vest and pants. And then we see Cary Grant here, who's like still doing up his tie and buttoning up his shirt and kind of leaving a little bit more of the exposed neck. And then seeing a little bit of his body form through his shirt without the jacket on. And of course, he eventually puts the jacket on, and even then it's much more clean cut. But just seeing that kind of level of like, okay, I have my kind of casual, my jacket's off, and then putting it back on to kind of get himself back together.
Yeah.
So then I just wanted to show you a quick contrast of looking at textures on the screen. Because again, it's not just about, especially in a black and white movie, it's not just about what your costume looks like on the actor. You also have to look at how are they up against the background and up against the other characters. So this was a good example of just, she's obviously got this dark color, but it's enough of a block in the image that you still see her as the main prominent person in the photo, in the screenshot. And yet you still have all these really like dynamic lines in the background. And then this is Earl Williams, who she's questioning and just trying to kind of befriend so that they can get along, and that she can hopefully coax the real story out of him. Mm-hmm. So this was one of the other females that I wanted to focus on. And again, she doesn't appear for very long. And then spoiler, she actually commits suicide eventually because she is. So this is Molly Malloy, I think is her name. Let me check my notes. Yes, Molly Malloy. So she's kind of the representative of like the over emotional female. She's like very, very easily stressed out, easily anxious. She talks to Earl Williams once because, he's very depressed and he needs someone to listen. And so after that happens, of course, all the news reporters run this whole story about how they're lovers and how she, is like keeping a secret for him, and she's going to bust him out of jail and all this other stuff. And of course, she ends up being the butt of all of these lies. And so she gets understandably very stressed from all of these fake news. And so she comes in and tries to just, defend herself and explain herself. But I love that they've sort of contrasted her with Hildy, because Hildy is such a strong image and presence in the scene. And then you see her come in with these again, nothing wrong with being feminine, but there's a much more softness to her look in terms of just even the curls that she's got on her hair, the flowers that she's got, especially the frilled kind of collar that she has, and then just the little puff sleeves that she's got. And the fact that this is almost slightly transparent even.
Yeah.
It tells a lot about how waif-like she is as a character, and she is very kind of blown back and forth by the breeze and by all the reporters in this very man's world. So So it was a good way to sort of showcase what other women at this time were experiencing in comparison to this very strong character of Hildy.
Well, and it's always interesting. I mean, this is a very old movie, like not very 21st century way of portraying women on screen or in any media, is that like making one woman strong by making the other one look weak. So that the strong one looks stronger by comparison, and she's very like not like the other girls, you know, like she can hang with the men. So that's tough to kind of see, but like it's very much changing. So that's good.
Yeah. And it shows you how far we've come too as women. Yeah. So, but yeah, I just thought that was, interesting that they played such a, because there are other females in this movie, like I said, but you only see them for 2 seconds. And like the one other really strong woman in black was at the very beginning, and then we never see her again. Yeah. So the fact that they had this person, as a contrast was interesting. It certainly made you emphasize and respect Hildy a lot in that scene. So this was just another kind of example of the different ways in which we can contrast different fabrics. I wanted to show just, all the multiple ways we can even put black onto a screen. Like this is not just a straight black, because obviously they would read as the same color. But the fact that you see a difference between this black and the gray stripe versus this black and a black pinstripe. Yeah. And then even the difference in the two suits between the two gentlemen. We have this character Pettibone, who he's totally just kind of the floppy character, and he's kind of our comic relief in this particular
like
scene.
The clown.
Yeah, he's definitely our clown character, and he comes in. I'm trying to remember what I wrote in his notes. Let's see. I wrote that he basically the 3-piece suit kind of gives him this sort of stuffy feeling, but then it's almost like it's kind of suffocating and burdening him, because he comes in sort of like all over the place and a little bit chaotic. And then like even just the way that his hair is kind of askew. And then he's got the bowler hat, which is also, it's not a comical hat, but I think in this scene, because everyone else is in these really sharp fedoras, just seeing him in the bowler kind of gives him a very specific character. So I think the costume designer did that really well. But even being able to see the difference in the suit jackets, not just size-wise, but pattern-wise, and just being able to fine-tune those little details in black and white. I think that was my last one.
Okay.
I might have put them out of order a little bit. But yes, so again, not a lot of different costumes, but you can see how subtle the costume designer was with really making sure the emphasis was on the people he needed it to be on. And even the characters that were more similar in silhouette or color, they didn't appear for very long. So you never saw them on screen for very long together, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you absolutely know that Rosalind is the center of attention in this movie.
Those stripes really
tell you. In every scene, she's always, the one that you focus on as the viewer.
Yeah, completely. Such an interesting challenge, like to try to differentiate your lead from everybody else when you don't have color.
It's true. And I was actually thinking about that because, how often do we really do projects where you're only limited to black and white? I don't think I've ever even done that. So I was like, I haven't really thought about like how I would have to see color and what it reads like in black and white versus me seeing it in color in front of me. And trying to like process what does that look like if I only have black and white as my color palette.
You would have to be like constantly doing camera tests, like taking pictures and desaturating them to make sure that like it looks how you think it's gonna look.
It's true. Well, and the thing that's interesting about this too is that like I mentioned before, her first chevron suit, it's not actually black and white.
Right.
Like it's black and pink. So like how does pink read on a black and white camera versus like seeing black and white on a stage? Because I've designed shows where they wanted the color palette to be like black, white, and red or something like that. But it's like that's a very different, you're making very different choices as opposed to when the whole entire screen filter is black and white. And it's not just the clothing that's black and white, but it's also like the actor has to look, filtered through black and white. So very different challenges to face.
Yeah, totally. And it's back then they didn't really preserve stuff as much as they do now. So if we have stuff that's been preserved, it's not in great condition. So I wish that we could know like what color things were originally. And I'm going to talk about that a little in mine actually, because there are a couple things that I don't know what color they were.
Right.
So it's, I wish we could see so that we could contrast that with what it looks like on screen, but we can't.
I know. I do wish that was one thing that I found more information about. I just didn't find a lot of information about the original colors of these. So it's like, I mean, other than and even the black and pink, it was like, it's supposed to be black and pink. Like, they don't actually know.
Yeah.
So, like, who knows what color it was in real life?
Well, and everybody who worked on it has passed away. So we can't ask them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, great job.
Tell me.
Great job. I need to rewatch that movie.
Thanks, Sarah.
That movie's so fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun one. And it's free on Amazon Prime, so that was nice.
Nice.
Woohoo! I'm so excited about this movie.
Yay. It was really nice to watch this again. So so my movie is Roman Holiday, one of my faves, the great Audrey Hepburn, directed by William Wyler. It came out in 1953. And the costumes are by none other than Edith Head, who is... I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk about her because she truly is like the most famous costume designer of all time, I think, and probably the first famous costume designer.
I know. I'm surprised we haven't covered her sooner.
Well, I mean...
But I guess we haven't talked about a lot of old movies.
Her career was very long. But she stopped working in like the 70s. So we haven't really covered anything past the 80s.
That's true.
Yet. So I'm excited about it. She worked, like I said, for decades. She was nominated for 35 Oscars. Obviously the most of anybody. Any costume designer. And then she won 8, which is so many Oscars.
Yeah, it's crazy.
She is one of only 2 costume designers to have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And the other one is Ruth E. Carter, who designed Black Panther. And she just got her star last month. So until last month, Edith Head was the only costume designer on there. I know.
That's so crazy to me, though.
We need to get more costume designers on there.
Awesome that, the second person is a woman of color, too.
Yes.
But, that's crazy.
I know. I read that and I was like, really? No Colleen Atwood? No Sandy Powell?
Yeah.
No, come on. No Aiko? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So
especially after she's passed.
I know.
I just feel like that should be an honorable thing.
I know. I don't know what qualifies you. Do you have to get nominated to do it? I don't know.
I don't know. People. That's a good question. Question for one of our listeners out there. Yeah. Someone tell us.
So this movie did win the Oscar for Best Costume Design in the black and white category. So I learned this until 1967. There were 2 different costume design Oscars, one for color and one for black and white. The category first started in 1949. Most of the Academy Awards for Best Costume Design in black and white were given to contemporary movies because the movies that were being shot in Technicolor were really big, bombastic musicals, fantasies, stuff like that. So it's so interesting that since they got rid of the black and white category, pretty much all of the winners for Best Costume Design are fantasy, sci-fi, some setting other than contemporary.
Yeah.
And that's how it's been since then. And only 3 movies that are contemporary have won since they got rid of the black and white category. So I just thought that was really interesting. Edith also won Oscars for Sabrina, All About Eve. She also designed movies like Funny Face, White Christmas, one of my personal favorites, To Catch a Thief. So she's really behind a lot of the iconic looks of her time. She's also... Edna Mode from The Incredibles is based on her.
I know. Oh, I love it so much.
Her iconic little round glasses, which were often dark, and it was said that she wore the dark glasses so that people couldn't see her eyes in meetings, so they couldn't really know what she was thinking, which I love.
That's so smart. I need to start doing that.
I know. Just wear sunglasses as a power move to a meeting.
It's true. My problem is I smile too much because, so even if you didn't see my face, I feel like you just read it in my mouth.
That's funny. So yeah, that's a little background on Edith. The setting for this movie is 1950s Rome, Italy. The typical silhouette of the 50s is based kind of on, it kind of started with Christian Dior's new look in 1947, which I think we've touched on a little bit. But the new look was revolutionary at the time because it was such a deviation from the silhouettes of the previous decade, of the 40s. Because like we said, in the 40s, there were a lot of fabric restrictions and rationing happening. So the silhouettes were really streamlined, not very showy at all, very utilitarian, sometimes military inspired even because of the war. So the new look kind of exploded onto the scene as quite literally a very new look that people were not used to seeing. It's characterized by a small waist and an hourglass silhouette, which emphasizes the feminine features of a woman's body, a full bust, full hips, small waist. And it uses a lot of fabric in the skirts especially. So it's like a very joyful thing to have happen after so many years of being restricted, not being able to use as much fabric as you would like to use. So that's a little background on the 50s. So let's talk about Audrey Hepburn's character, Princess Anne. So in this movie, she's basically this princess, and she's on sort of like a European tour. I don't know what country she's supposed to be from. Didn't really look into it. I don't know if they ever say.
I know. I was like, I don't know if I remember either. It's been so long since I've seen the movie.
She has sort of like a non-regional British sounding accent. But she's basically like on this tour, and she feels very restricted by all the rules she has to follow, all the public appearances she has to make where she has to be polite and shake hands with people and just be a perfect princess. And she's like really struggling with feeling restricted by her life, which is kind of where we join her at the beginning of the movie. So this is the beginning. She's at a ball where she's meeting all these dignitaries and stuff. So she's beautiful. Obviously, she's Audrey Hepburn. One of the most beautiful women of all time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
like timeless. It's like Edith Head. She just lives on forever. In your memory.
Legend. And also just like a really good person. Like she was a real philanthropist. Mm-hmm. She was cool.
Yeah, everything about her life was, I don't know, it's just so...
She seems rad.
Respectable.
Yeah.
That's not enough of a good word to describe it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, just like like the embodiment of grace and goodness, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So this is her gown that she's wearing. A very 50s silhouette, although the fullness starts at the hip instead of at the waist, which is, I mean, it was pretty typical of the time.
Yeah.
Beautiful off-the-shoulder gown. It's got beading on it. And apparently in real life it was sort of like silver. I saw a picture of it on display somewhere, and it has really yellowed. So I didn't pull that because I was like, well, that's not actually what color it was. You know, we don't need to look at that.
It's not gold.
So, yeah, here's a full length. And apparently...
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's really iconic. I love the sash. You know, it's just sort of like a royal sash on it with some like metal looking.
It makes me think very like Anastasia, even though I don't know if that's actually the country she's from, but that sash makes me think of the Russian.
Yeah. Apparently in her screen test, maybe the director was worried that it was too long, but Audrey was an accomplished dancer. They were like, can you dance in it? She was like, oh, I can dance in it. Like, watch me dance. Don't worry about it.
Again, just good at everything.
And then she's got beautiful, jewels on, tiara. Just like she looks like a perfect princess. I love her hair. It's sort of like a crown of braids. Beautiful. And then
oh yeah.
Yeah. This is I'll brighten this picture up when I put it on Instagram. It's a little bit dark. And then this is a fun little shot because during this scene, her feet really hurt. So she starts to like shift her weight and take her shoes off and kind of stretch her feet out. And so you get this nice shot of what the underneath of her dress might look like. And I don't know if this is what it actually looked like or if it's probably some sort of thing they made just to shoot this.
Like doctored up.
Yeah, like a half a petticoat crinoline thing. But I thought it was really fun, this little peek underneath the dress. Oh, and here's the rendering. Beautiful.
Ooh.
Edith Head made beautiful renderings. I don't think she ever really knew how to sew herself, but
I think there was a lot of articles about that.
Yeah. That's okay. I mean, it helps, but you don't have to. Clearly.
There's a lot of designers actually that don't know how to sew.
Yeah.
I would say more than not.
Yeah. It's interesting that the sash is red in this picture. I wonder if it was red in real life. Probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting to me, too. Like, when you're rendering for a black and white movie, do you render it in black and white? Or do you, like, you know what I mean? It's like, because you're never going to ever see that as red in the picture. So, like, it just makes me wonder, you know, where do you make that decision to, do I just do this in the black and white that I want to see? Or do I do it in the color I think is going to read as this shade of gray?
I think she rendered in color. I didn't find any other renderings from this movie, but I have like a big coffee table book that I was looking at, and it seems like all of her renderings were in color, no matter what the movie, if it was or wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So next we have her nightgown. And this is when she's in her bedroom talking about how much she's tired of her life. And she kind of goes into hysterics, and they end up drugging her with a sedative so that she can sleep, which makes me sad. Yeah. So this, it's definitely period, but it looks kind of young. It looks like childlike and very prim. And I think that just tells us more about how she's kind of being restricted. She's not being permitted to be like a normal young woman. She's kind of being held back and kept in this life that she doesn't necessarily. It's not that she doesn't like want it. It's just that she's feeling like she needs to escape for a while. Mm-hmm. And I love this. This is her. I called her in my notes her handler, but then I think she's a countess of some kind.
Her handler.
She's just like going over her schedule.
I do love that.
I was like, oh no, she's in charge. I like her gown. It looks. I don't know what fabric this is. It could be some sort of file where it's like got the little tiny ribbing on it. Or is there one called moire or something that has sort of like a...
Moire?
It makes sort of like shiny patterns. Yeah. I like it a lot. I think it's really cool.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's funny because like her, if you just looked at her head and her face, she does actually look a little bit like Edith Head.
Yeah, the glasses too. That's funny. That's very funny. So then she sneaks out of the palace while under the influence of a sedative. Hijinks ensue. And so this is the outfit that she puts on to escape. And I think the sedative doesn't kick in until she's like on the back of a truck escaping. Yeah.
Moving vehicle and sedative do not go together.
Honestly, she's lucky she didn't get kidnapped and die. But this is the outfit she puts on that she wears for a lot of most of the movie in the middle. But it goes through a like kind of a transformation as her day goes on. So it starts very buttoned up. She's got sort of like a little tie at the top. You can see her teeny waist.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll talk now about, I read some stuff in my Edith Head book about Audrey, and I don't want to like make a habit of commenting on actors' bodies, but this relates to the costume design, so that's why I'm going to talk about it.
Okay.
So anybody who's sensitive to that kind of discussion might need to skip ahead a little bit. So Audrey suffered from malnutrition during World War II. She's Belgian. And she was very thin, which was not really the ideal body type of the 50s. Obviously, like, they were all thin, but they, like I said, the ideal was sort of like a full bosom and full hips, hourglass silhouette. And so Edith talked a lot about like wanting to de-emphasize Audrey's thinness. So that's why she has sort of like a long sleeve shirt. She said her collarbones stuck out a lot. So she tried to cover those. And then she put her in full skirts, like no form-fitting skirts because like her hips were so slim. And then she had like really muscular legs because she was a dancer and like they were like probably sinewy, you know, like thin and muscular. So she doesn't wear anything shorter than like a midi length. So that kind of influenced Edith's choices when she clothed Audrey. And then just another tidbit is that her waist was 19 and a half inches.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
That's teeny tiny.
That's like half of a lot of people's busts that I know. That's like only measuring from like underarm to underarm.
She was a petite lady.
Insane.
Yeah. Very
so crazy.
Very little.
So was she, well, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but was she intentionally malnutritioned or was it just something from when she was born that she just didn't get enough?
I think it was during the war.
Up?
A lot of people in the war did not have access to food. So people went hungry during a lot of the war. I don't know specifically about Belgium during World War II, but like a lot of the countries, like, I don't know if they were invaded, but if the Nazis came in, like,
Belgium was known for being like constantly overtaken by multiple countries.
That's what I thought. I read that.
It was like that tiny one in the middle of everything. So like every country was invading Belgium.
Yeah. So if she was sort of like, she was probably like a teenager during that time or a child.
That's true. Okay, so that makes sense then.
Yeah, if she wasn't getting food during the time when she was supposed to be growing and developing, then that's kind of what contributed to how slight she was. So that's it. That's all I want to say about that. Okay, so this skirt, I don't know what color it was in real life. I really wanted to know, just like out of curiosity.
Yeah.
On the poster that like they colorized, they made it blue, but then in some like colorized images, it's like beige tan.
Okay. I know. I was thinking blue initially, but then I was like, who knows?
I don't know. And I did a light Google. I didn't do a deep Google of it. So if the information's out there, I couldn't find it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is like, she's a princess in disguise. You know, she needs to look kind of normal and blend in. And then here's Gregory Peck in his one outfit that he wears. Just like Cary Grant, he kind of just sticks to a suit. And he's also a journalist in this movie. So he looks a little bit more rumpled because he's definitely poor. Like, because, you know, they go back to his flat and it's like one room. It's tiny. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of like a penniless American journalist in Rome. But he's still a heartthrob, so he still has to look good. Here's a picture of her. This is from her screen test, but this is like kind of what the outfit transforms into. Like rolls up the sleeves, unbuttons the shirt, puts a scarf on. I tried to figure out where she got the scarf, could not figure it out. Like in the movie, in the world of the movie.
You mean like practically speaking?
Yeah, so she starts in like a pump heel, and then she buys the sandals from a street vendor. I love the sandals.
Mm-hmm. I do love those.
But the scarf just appears, and it doesn't explain where it came from. That's okay. Maybe I just missed it. I don't know. And then she gets her haircut, too, which is like, this haircut is so iconic, so cute. Mm-hmm. Love it.
Very Audrey Hepburn.
Like, honestly, I would wear this outfit. And there are probably some outfits I have worn that look kind of like this. It's so cute, so timeless. Mm-hmm. And also, apparently, they shot during the summer, and Rome was very hot. So I think it's also very practical for shooting outside in the summer. Yeah. Here's another picture, this iconic picture of them on the stairs.
So cute.
Yeah, just adorable. I love it.
I know. This makes me want to go back out and get more blouses again. I've like run out of a lot of because we've been stuck in quarantine. I'm just wearing like sweaters and sweatpants. Like
I know. My sweatpants have like holes in them because I've been wearing them for a straight year.
That's how I feel too. I was like, I've had some of these pants for so long and I don't have the money to go out and buy a ton of new clothes. So like all of my jeans have now gotten holes at like the crotch and the knees. And like
I have powerful thighs,
I really
so
shouldn't
that's where
be
it wears
wearing
out.
these anymore.
I just patch it. Patch it and move on.
I need to do that. It was recent holes for the jeans. But yeah, some of my other sweatpants, I was just like, these don't need to be patched. These just need to get given away or thrown away.
My one favorite pair of jeans, I patched because I have thighs that rub together because I got chub rub. And I patched them in the crotch so many times that I finally there's no fabric left to patch. Like no. And I still have them because I refuse to let go, but I can't wear them anymore.
That's how I feel with some of my jeans. I was like, but I love these jeans. They fit so well.
It's so sad to have to let them go. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Side note.
Yeah, so you can see a little bit more of her blouse in this shot. I think probably they had multiples of this, obviously, since she wears only this. But like if you look at the long sleeve version versus the short sleeve, like it doesn't look like that much sleeve is rolled up into that much roll.
I was gonna say, I was like, there's no way.
Yeah. So a little bit of movie magic. Switch it out for one that is shorter so that it doesn't look so bulky on the arm. What else did I say? Oh, yeah. Throughout the day, as she's sort of going about her day and having fun in Rome, she gets a lot looser and more free. And that's reflected in the clothes, of course. Mm-hmm. she doesn't, I don't think she stands out. I mean, she stands out on screen because she's Audrey Hepburn, but I think the idea is that she blends in because she doesn't want people to recognize her.
Right.
Love the sandals. I need to get some sandals like this.
I know.
Do I have anything else to say about his suit? No, he looks good. It's just a suit. I think it's definitely like, it's nice to contrast it to the one that Cary Grant was wearing because I think it's a lot less sharp than that one was. A little more relaxed, probably summer weight because it's hot.
But still very much of that time period.
Yeah.
That kind of, the wider leg is starting to be, I shouldn't say starting to be, but it's returning in the 1940s, I think. Or this is 1950?
Yeah, 53, yeah. So
53, okay. Yeah, so it's actually, it's getting wider in the 1950s because I think it was still pretty slim in the 40s because they were trying to save fabric. So
Yeah.
Tells you a lot about the period for sure.
And it's fun too, it's fun to cover a contemporary movie, but that was contemporary at the time. It's obviously not contemporary anymore, but it's so interesting to see. They're not trying to do any specific period. They're just doing their time, 1953.
Right. What's contemporary at this time is now period for us.
Exactly.
But then what's contemporary for us will be period, 10 years from now.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Always makes me wonder, what will our decades be characterized by? It's hard to really tell when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, especially since, we're going through fashion so quickly. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint what is characteristic of our generation.
Yep, completely. So interesting. So this is her look at the end when she's gone back to the palace and she's having a press conference because they lied and said that she was really sick, and she's just kind of out saying, I'm better now and I'm going to continue my tour. So Edith I watched an interview with her from 1,000 years ago, that they made about this movie, and she said this is lace, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is lace, because I looked at it and I went, is that organza? But it's not, it's lace.
Yeah,
it's very pretty,
so beautiful.
Back to the feminine, light, princessy sort of thing. I love this little hat and how it emphasizes her new hair and her face. So pretty, and the pearls are beautiful too. Here's a full body shot of it. The silhouette is just gorge.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe the entire thing is in lace.
I know, so pretty,
so beautiful.
It's so romantic looking, so feminine, and demure, but still just yeah, I'm the prettiest in the room. What about it?
I'm not going to lie. I love this sleeve. And I think, we've been working on this for the photo shoot we keep talking about. But that giant kind of lantern sleeve is just so, hers stops at her elbow. But I love that look. And being transparent too, and being able to still see the delicate arm underneath is, I don't know. There's just something really beautiful about that.
I love the sleeve. I love the length of it. I love everything about it. And once again, we have the volume starting at the hip instead of starting right at the waist. And that just calls more attention to her figure,
Yeah.
And then this is her seeing them at the press conference and realizing that they actually know that they knew she was the princess all along. Oh no. I was going to talk a little bit. I did this in a weird order. This is he changes into this outfit on the second day, and it's more of a tweed blazer. I like it.
I do too.
Changes
I love
up the texture.
Blazer.
Yeah. I think it's a fun way to be well, he's changing his clothes. It doesn't look that different, but it looks different enough that we know that he's changed.
Yeah. I feel tweed is one of those textures that I always want to pet.
Yeah.
You can feel it even when you see it on screen. It's tweed, but you also I feel I get a tactile texture when I think of tweed or when I see tweed.
It's also delightful to work with because it's often very loosely woven and woolly, and things that are that way are really easy to manipulate and make them do what you want them to do. So anybody who's ever made something out of a tweed is oh yeah, piece of cake. It just does what you want it to do. You don't have to even argue with it.
It's the little slubby texture I love.
Right. So this is Irving. He's sort of our sidekicky guy. He's constantly getting things spilled on and getting tripped. And it makes me feel very bad for him because nobody ever really apologizes about it.
Oh, no.
It's just like he keeps trying to spill the beans, and Gregory Peck's character keeps stopping him from spilling the beans by pouring water on him or tripping him at the restaurant, and it makes me sad.
Poor guy.
But I really like his outfit. But it's like a nice, like, sort of like wide neck T-shirt with a high waisted pant and then sort of like a jacket. And I like how casual he is compared to Joe, which is Gregory Peck's character's name that I haven't used until just now.
It's okay. I kept using Carrie, so.
So yeah, he's just like he's just more casual, and I like the sort of other example of sort of like 1950s guy clothes because it's a very tight T-shirt. It shows his chest very nicely.
It's funny because he actually looks very contemporary, like because this fashion trend is kind of returning for menswear. So it's like we look at this even though it's from, over 50 years ago, and it still looks like, oh, yeah, I could see that guy on the street today.
High-waisted pants are coming back for men, and I could not be more excited. I think they look so good on men. Mm-hmm. I wear more of them, dudes. They look good on you. Yeah, I mean, like, this outfit, I could see on a TikTok guy doing fashion outfits. Uh-huh. Yeah, totally. And then here's one more shot of them at the end, a little more formal because they're, visiting the palace. Just a nice, he's, got a stripe, which differentiates him from everybody else in the shot. And then Irving is like a nice sort of complement in his lighter tone.
Yeah, even in this last image, he looks like, I think he just has a really contemporary face too. Maybe that's the other thing.
Maybe that's, yeah. Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is something I learned on Wikipedia, which is that another designer had a big hand in Audrey's daytime look, and her name was Sonia de Leenaert. She was a European fashion designer, and she was the inventor of the capri pant.
Wow.
Which was just a piece in her capri collection, but it's like the only one that has retained the name capri because it was distinctive and it became famous. So Edith Head recognized how revolutionary her capri collection was and put it in this movie. So this belt and this skirt are from the collection, I think.
Nice.
And Audrey Hepburn went on to wear capri pants in Sabrina as well. So Edith Head introduced the capri collection to the world basically through Audrey Hepburn, but the capri pants are the ones that really made a lasting legacy. And Sonia didn't get like any credit in this movie, but now we know that was her contribution. And,
right.
I think that's pretty common, like for them to have, it's like Edith had designed it. And by design, we mean she pulled whatever she needed to pull in and put it all together. And that's designing, and that's totally valid. But I think it's important to recognize the work of Sonia.
Especially for such a revolutionary garment like that.
I know.
That lasted for a long time.
And we still call them capri pants. So, clearly it's a legacy. So I thought that was interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah. So that's Roman Holiday. Ta-da.
Yay. Thank you, Sarah. Good job.
Thank you.
I know. It's nice to always have those extra fun facts, especially when you we talk about costume design so much, but we also both came kind of from a fashion background as well. So it's like you have a little bit of that tie-in from both ends, and a lot of the same skills kind of translate through both. So I'm glad that, it shows that they're working with fashion designers all the time. And even today, you'll have stylists on movies in addition to the costume designer. Sometimes they'll work together. Sometimes it's kind of like they'll trade off what they work on or what costumes they do. And so, yeah, there's a lot of crossover between fashion and costumes.
Absolutely. And I think it's in the Wikipedia article, it was like, because she didn't get any credit. And I'm like, but like, that's not that uncommon. Like, it's not that I think that Edith Head was like stepping on her to take her success. I think it was just that like, she found clothes that she really liked and put them in her movie. And since she was the one who found them and put them on the actor, she was credited as the designer. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that it's important now that we know where it came from,
Yeah. And the hard thing, too, is that, like, with costume designers, a lot of times we are choosing clothes
Yeah.
that already exist. So like to credit every single designer brand that's on your clothing, you know, it's like when you do have to do that project where it's like you have no budget and you have like $10 in your name to try and costume 100 people. It's like, well, then a lot of stuff is going to come from Target or Goodwill. And it's like, you can't just like go to a brand and say, okay, I got that thing from Goodwill. Sorry, Goodwill needs to be credited on the, you know, it just doesn't make sense to be crediting stuff like that. Because clothes are just a natural part of our job.
Exactly. Especially in contemporary movies. Yeah. And it was a contemporary movie at the time. So it totally makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So, but it's good that we're recognizing that now, you know, years later. Better late than never, I guess.
Yeah. And I think she had a successful career. So it's not as if Edith like stole this and like she never had success again. She was a successful designer. Right. So.
Ah, cool. Yeah. That's a fun fact.
It is a fun fact, right?
Cool. Well, that's our episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I'm hoping we get to cover more black and white movies in the future.
Yeah.
There's many more out there that we probably have on our list.
Totally. And I'm sure we could find some examples of like contemporary movies now that are done in black and white that would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when I was trying to pick which movie I wanted to cover because I just watched Malcolm and Marie, which is also all in black and white.
Oh.
And they're literally, it's like one scene that happens over less than 24 hours. It's like overnight. And it's just two characters the entire scene, and it's just them going back and forth between fighting and then making up and then fighting again.
Wow.
So it's a really interesting movie. It's definitely one of those things where it's a lot, like, it's a deep thinking movie. You have to kind of like understand what the director was trying to do. But again, looking at how black and white shows up on the screen and how to really costume for that.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yes, definitely more movies to cover in the future.
Yeah. So send them our way if you have suggestions, as always.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for everyone who's listening. Again, don't forget to review us. We're still donating $1 for every review that we get.
Yes, we are.
Sarah, do you want to remind them what, did we pick a charity that we're donating to?
I think Dress for Success is a good candidate. I think we should do Dress for Success because they help people find like professional wardrobes so that they can like get employment and stuff. And I think that especially right now, is a important thing to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, just if you're able to review us, I believe Apple Podcast is where you can review us.
Please do.
I don't think you can do it on Spotify yet.
I don't think so. I looked into it and I don't know how to do it. If you know how to do it, please do it. But I don't know how.
Yeah, exactly.
But the ratings and the reviews are what will get us to a bigger audience. So if you like us and you want us to find more ears, then that's the best thing you can do for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for everyone who's supporting us. We've been seeing even just new followers within the last week, which has been really exciting. So for those of you who are new and just joining us, we're hoping you're still as excited about costumes to talk about them every week as we are. Yeah. Or I should say every other week. And if you guys have suggestions on any other topics or themes that you want to cover or just specific movies you want to cover, know that we are adding them to our list, our very extensive list, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can.
Yeah, we definitely
Thanks, everyone.
Will. Thank you.
So I'm JoJo.
I'm Sarah.
Thanks for listening to The Costume Plot.
Thanks. Bye.
We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Costume Plot. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Costume Plot. If you have a question, comment, or movie suggestion, you can email us at thecostumplot@gmail.com.
Our theme music is by Jesse Tim, and our artwork is by JoJo Siu. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts.